We should be more interested in Bible prophecy, end-time Bible prophecy, than ever before. I was talking to a church pastor the other day who was saying we really shouldn't be overly interested in Bible prophecy. We should be interested in traditional things, saving the lost, witnessing, and Bible study, rather than going overboard on Bible prophecy in particular. My response was that the church age has been around for 2,000 years now. That's about 40 generations if you count 50 years as the length of a generation. 40 times 50 is 2,000. Anyway, it's been okay for the other generations to not be interested in Bible prophecy beyond a certain point, because they were not living in the end time generation. But we are. So we are in a different situation. We're in it calls for a different response. Daniel 10 says that Bible prophecy would be sealed up until the time of the end. Now this can mean until the time of the end time generation. In other words, 50 years, let's say 70 years before the tribulation. And in Daniel 9:25, around verse 25, it says prophecy would be sealed up. And it's talking about the 70th week of Daniel 9, which was fulfilled in the war, the Roman-Jewish war, that ran from mid-66 to 73, mid-73. And since that time, Bible prophecy has been sealed up until the return of Israel. And we're in the end time generation now. You take 1950 and you add 70, it brings us to 2020. This is the end time generation. Now, what is different about from 1948 or 1950 up until today? What changed in the late 1940s besides the return of Israel taking place? Well, the late 40s was when the atomic bomb and the nuclear bomb came into existence, and jets were invented in the late 40s, or the mid-40s, I should say, and missiles have been perfected since that time. We're in the generation in which the prophecy in Revelation 13:7 can take place. That prophecy says the Antichrist would take over the world. And that has never been possible before, because the technology has never been there that would enable one country to take over the world. But now, since we have nuclear bombs and nuclear missiles and computers and all this other stuff, we have the technology, so we know we're in the time in which the end time prophecy can take place, the conquest of the world. Revelation 13:7. Now this has to be talking about a superpower nation doing this, because if a non-superpower nation tried to take over the world by making war, which is what Revelation 13:7 is talking about, it says the Antichrist would make war against the Christian countries. and it would gain power over every nation. Now, if a non-superpower tried to do that, one of the two superpowers could wipe them out. So that narrows the field down to the two superpowers, America and Russia. And now America is not going to do it. So that leaves Russia as the only nation that can be considered for this role, the role of the conqueror of the world. Now I'm trying to explain that Bible prophecy is no longer sealed up since the advent of the nuclear bomb, because a lot of Bible prophecy talks about fire falling from the sky. That's Luke 17, verse 29. It says, a day will come which is like the day that fire fell on Sodom. It's talking about nuclear bombs falling. And there's Matthew 24, 29. It says the stars will fall. That's talking about man-made stars. Nuclear bombs are man-made stars. Why? Because stars operate on this thing called nuclear fusion. And what do nuclear bombs operate on? Nuclear fusion. Duh. Nuclear bombs are man-made stars. So don't let anyone try to talk you out of getting into Bible prophecy, trying to study Bible prophecy in particular, and bringing it up, and recommending to your pastor that he delivers sermons on Bible prophecy. There's nothing wrong with that. There is something wrong about avoiding Bible prophecy in this age in particular. We're in the age of the fulfillment of end-time Bible prophecy. Try to get that into your head. As far as Revelation 13:7 is concerned, I'm expecting that to be fulfilled this year, 2020. And Russia bombs America. How could they do that? People say Russia can't do that because it would be suicidal. Well, it used to be suicidal, but now we have disarmed. America has disarmed because Russia tricked us into disarming by Russia ending the Cold War, giving up Eastern Europe, letting the Soviet Union split up, giving up the monopoly on power that the Communist Party had, and finally Gorbachev resigned on paper. He never really resigned. He's still in power behind the scenes. Yes, the old guy, he's 89 years old. He's still in charge. Putin is simply his surrogate, his underling. Putin takes orders from Gorbachev. And when Russia bombs America, Gorbachev will come back, he'll give speeches, he'll be on TV, and he'll say, I'm the great one, I did it. I did what no other man has done. And he'll glorify himself, and he's the Antichrist. He's the one that'll claim to be God. You might say, how can an old man be the Antichrist? The Antichrist is supposed to be a very attractive, very charismatic figure. Well, Gorbachev used to be that. In the mid-'80s, he was very dashing, very attractive, very, very impressive. And he did win the hearts and minds of everybody in the Western world. There's not a single person who really had anything bad to say about Gorbachev. Well, of course, there was a few people that were saying that Russia was deceiving America, but they were basically fringe groups, like the John Birch Society, and they were actually right. They still are right, but I don't think they're really pushing this agenda that they should be pushing. that Russia is deceiving America, and that Russia will bomb this country when we have disarmed enough, and we actually have crossed the threshold already. We're like a dead man walking. Anytime Russia presses a button, they can get away with it. They can bomb us with impunity. Our arsenal is so small that Russia's interceptor missiles will destroy every bit of it. You might say, well, why hasn't Russia bombed us then? That's what I want on. That's what I cannot answer that question, except I think they want to set up a scenario. I think it's going to be Venezuela. They're going to try to get us to intervene in Venezuela. And then when they do, when we do, then Russia will say, we're, a rogue elephant, we're out of control, we have to be stopped, and they'll blame us. They'll say, we're the aggressor. And they like to do that. They like to turn everything around, twist everything around. So if you hear about America getting ready to get into Venezuela to overthrow Maduro, the dictator, the communist dictator, that's the time for you to get nauseated at the very thought of what may be coming very soon. And if you do get nauseated, it's only because you have a sense of the gravity of the situation. Finally, for those of you that are in the big city, when Russia bombs the big cities, that will be the time of the rapture for the people in the big cities. The people outside the big cities will not be going up. The people in other countries, in South America, in Africa, they won't be going up in the rapture. The rapture will be very limited in scope. It will extend to Japan. We have a military base there. Russia will bomb that base. So the rapture will extend from one side of the world to the other side, but it won't be inclusive of all the area in between. I'm going to write a transcript and put it in the description box under this video, so please make a paper copy, because when EMP occurs, when the Russian attack occurs, EMP will destroy computers. The only way you can store the information is to put it on paper. The Feast of Tabernacles should be the time of the attack. In the law of Moses, Feast of Tabernacles was one of the big three feasts. It was the biggest Holocaust. That means the largest number of animals were sacrificed on a fire at that time, 199. Now, Paul the Apostle says the holy feasts were prophetic of things to come. On that basis, I take the 199, the number 199, you apply that to the start of the church age. The church age started in 30 AD with the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, and Pentecost in that year. You add 199 decades, it brings us to 2020. So I think in that sense, the Feast of Tabernacles will be prophetic. And it could also be prophetic as the close of the church age, because you see, the church age began with Passover, with the crucifixion. Or you could say it began at Pentecost. The church began at Pentecost. And so it would be fitting for the church age to end at the Feast of Tabernacles because that closes the circle. You see, the harvest season began with Passover. That was the barley season. And then Pentecost was the harvest for the wheat. And then Feast of Tabernacles will be the finish with maybe the harvest of the grapes, some other form of harvest. But it is a harvest season in some capacity. And so those big three feasts, because Tabernacle is the finish of the big three, that is evidence that for it to be the time of the rapture, because the rapture is described as a time of harvest in one of the parables, Matthew 13. Christ says, the harvest is the end of the age. It says the end of the world in the King James, but later translations are a little bit better. They say the end of the age. What else? Okay, in Revelation 14:14 through verse 16, Christ, well, it says the Son of Man. That's another name for Christ. The Son of Man receives a sickle, and he harvests the earth, and that would fit in with the idea of harvest, of the rapture being a time of the harvest, and it would fit in with, like I say, with Feast of Tabernacles. One more thing about Revelation 14. Verse 1 mentions 144,000 Christian Jews in Israel, and it mentions the 12 tribes. That would refer to Israel. And do you know that someone has said there are already 144 saved Jews in Israel this year? So that is another sign that this is the year. Well, that's all for now. I don't want to go on and on. One more thing, just in closing. Let me say that tribulation will be 5 months. If it begins in October, it will end in March. March will be a fitting time because the end of the tribulation will be the end of the Antichrist. The Antichrist will be overthrown. That's why the tribulation ends. The tribulation is a time in which he is in power. So once he is overthrown, that automatically brings an end to the trib. And the trib will be 5 months. That's in Revelation 9, verse 5 and 10. Now, mid-March is the celebration of Purim, Purim. It's in the book of Esther. It's when an Antichrist figure, a forerunner of the Antichrist, was killed, was executed. His name was Haman. And if the real Antichrist is destroyed or killed at the time that Haman was killed, that would be appropriate.